Hey guys, this is Marc Owings, and I'm your host for the Unbridled Life Podcast, where we have real, raw, and unreligious conversation to encourage and challenge men and women in their daily lives. Hey, welcome to the Unbridled Life Podcast. I'm here with my good friend Chad Lacefield and Megan. They're back for another round. This is your first time.
First time.
Come on.
Unbridled, here we go.
So really good friends of ours. We've done ministry, life, vacations, missions, marriage, and so much more. Kids, I got to officiate both of their kids' wedding, and I'm not great at weddings. But they let me do it, and I love that memory. So welcome to the Unbridled Life.
Well, thanks for having us. It's so fun to get to be here with my man.
And are you talking about Marc or me? That was kind of awkward. He introduced us, and you're like, my man, Marc, I'm right here. I can hear you.
I'm her little old man.
Everyone
knows
you, baby Chad, you. It's always you. Always has been you.
I love the way she calls him baby Chad.
I know.
Yeah, I love it. It's very endearing.
They've been sweethearts since what, 16?
16 and 18, yep.
Yep, 16,
awesome.
18.
Yeah.
I love that story.
It's such an interesting start to your story. Just for people who are just catching back up with us, tell us your starting. I know I love y'all's story. I think it's a miracle story.
Well, I was born romantic, and it taught her from the beginning. I'll let you tell it, babe.
Well, we all have a startup story. We were 16 and 18. I went to private school. He went to public school, and I was just tired of the private school boys, so I decided to go with a friend from church to a party because those two things
Just
go
venturing
together.
outside your bubble.
Yes. So I went with some friends to a pasture party, and I met this tall, brown-haired, blue-eyed boy, and I took his beer away, and he kissed me to get it back.
And now she's talking about me, not Marc.
Only in Texas would you have a
Yeah, she wasn't
pasture
even
party.
born.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing, where you met me, we're recording this podcast.
In Alito, absolutely. He's Alito, born and bred. Well, not born, but he's been here most of his life.
That's right. Played on the football team. And they've won like 52 championships.
But just to be clear, I was not a part of those.
Well, we got to start somewhere. Yeah. So we're talking about, baby, you introduce this because you
We're
say
talking about staying in the boundaries of marriage.
Come on. And if you've stayed with us in this podcast series, we've been in a series just talking about marriage. We got to listen to Jason and Kim. Y'all were a part of that story along with us. And there was a misstep in the workplace. And then we've got MJ and Angela who had a misstep in ministry. We were listening to Chad and Megan's podcast. I'm going to let y'all introduce that, tell us all about it, tell where to get it, drive it. Go, May.
So we have a podcast called Built for Two. It was actually birthed out of a fun little adventure that we went on when we were on vacation in Costa Rica. But we launched the podcast so that we can have a, what? Belize, my bad.
I was on that trip with her. We were on that
Belize.
trip.
Different
Oh,
Belize trip. Different Belize trip.
Same Belize, different trip.
Okay.
Anyways, we were on a trip to Belize, and God just kind of burdened our hearts for marriage. We've had a heart for marriage ministry for over a decade, but it was in this adventure that we kind of broke down the simplicity of marriage and really our heart for not just marriages inside of the context of ministry, but also in businesses. And how do we really inspire people to pursue success and not lose their legacy in the process? So Built for Two is all about the simple ways that we can stay connected in our marriages, to be intentional, to invest in the right things the right way, all for the sake of our legacy. So you can find Built for Two on any of the listening platforms. We're on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, social media. Just search Built for Two Marriage, and we love to encourage and inspire couples of all ages and stages.
So birthed out of a kayak. So men, if you're out there and you want your own podcast in a marriage podcast, go buy a kayak.
Oh, or don't.
Yeah. That's another podcast. They'll explain the kayak story. It didn't go as great as what she anticipated. But a podcast was birthed out of it. I want to tell you, I don't know what episode it is, but I listened to one and it was safeguarding your marriage. I related to Chad. I love the boundaries and things that he put up in the workplace. And I dabble in business. I think that's a reality that just came to me at a fully connected marriage. I was sitting there listening to these businessmen talk, and I was like, I dabble in it. I don't do it every day. There's people who dabble in ministry every day. But listening to what I called the three kings just kind of talk about, there was three businessmen just talking about their struggles, what they have to face in the workplace. I was looking around like, I don't have to face that, but they do. I wanted you to hear from someone I consider a king. There's priests and kings, and there's some who carry both. And I think Chad carries both of those. But he carries the kingship of being out in the world. And I know that's all Christian talk and everything, but there's certain people who can walk in that land, and there's a lot of pitfalls.
You know, so first of all, we're honored to be here, and I want to correct you.
Yes, sir.
In all walks of life, whether you're in the workplace or whether you're in ministry, the reality is the struggle's there. The reality is there needs to be what we're talking about today, because we're all human, and there's things pulling us. So if you're in ministry, if you're in the workplace, you need to listen in. You need to stop what you're doing and listen in, because not because what we're saying, but because of the things that we've put in place and that God's allowed us to, will help you in the walk of life.
Well, I love that too. I want to tell you, if you don't have friends that correct you, correction is love. No, I mean that. He reframes a thought that I had, and that's good. Sometimes we pull back. It's like, man, don't correct me. You're on my podcast.
And this is the last time Chad and Megan will be on this podcast.
No, it's not at all. What I do, if you have friends, you got to let them into all areas of your life. And I love the way you reframe that, because you're right. Jason was in the business and MJ was in the ministry, and you just nailed it. So we're talking about this. I'm going to let you guys run. I listened to this podcast that you guys did, and I went, God, they got to come on here and do this. How do you stay in your kind of lane or your boundary?
So I'm going to lay a little bit of a foundation. I told you we were in high school when we met. We were also in high school when we got married. Because of, just decisions that we made as high schoolers having fun, we got married and started a family really, really young. And Christ was not the center of our home. I grew up in the church. He did not. But it was very early in our marriage that God got a hold of Chad's life. And from that moment on, which that is an incredible salvation story in and of itself. But from that moment on, we knew that we wanted to do things different than the world. And we knew that we wanted to fight for our family. We didn't really have a lot modeled for us, and we didn't at that point have people speaking into our marriage, but we tried to get that as quickly as possible. And so the safeguarding our marriage, the borders and boundaries or trenches and fences that we put in place is because we were brought up in the church. I feel like in a very healthy...
You were brought up in the church.
No. I'm just saying our marriage from the time he was saved until we've been a part of church community, church life, ministry on my part, business on his part, but we've been a part of our marriage has grown up in the context of healthy church and healthy community for the most part. And so that being said, we've had plenty of people to look to and to watch. There were times in our marriage that Chad's like, don't marriage book me. Because I would read all the marriage books and want to just immediately apply all of it at one time. But because of that, there were bits and pieces of it that we would grab hold of and begin to have these conversations that would then lead to us building the marriage that we wanted.
And so as we got married, Megan was in the ministry world at very shortly after our marriage. When I got saved, pretty short after we got married, several years, a couple hard years there, but several years after. I had always been in the workplace. She had been in the ministry world. So we have two different worlds colliding, as Marc was explaining when we first started this podcast. It is different. There's no doubt about it. They both have struggles. They both have their issues and their glories. But the reality is there's different things that you come up against.
Challenges.
That's a better word, challenges. And so we knew, me being in the workplace, her being in ministry, no matter where you are, there's got to be ground rules. There has to be things that are non-negotiables. We used to, when we were first married, we called them non-negotiables.
Yep. And some of them were birthed out of pain points. They were birthed out of something that happened that was itchy or uncomfortable. I remember distinctly there was a relationship that was a brother relationship with another man that was on staff, and Chad's like, this makes me uncomfortable. But if he hadn't been bold enough to say this makes me uncomfortable, I wouldn't have even recognized or realized, and a boundary wouldn't have been put in place. So it came out of like, here's what we want, but also like we don't know what we don't know. So as we navigated it, then we had opportunities to put some of these in place.
What I love about this, and we talked about this at our Fully Connected Marriage, I love that you were able to communicate without defensiveness. I can't even remember the lady, it's not mine. She said the number one cause for divorce right now is defensiveness. So Chad's able to come to Megan and say, hey, this makes me uncomfortable. It's not a big why, my heart wasn't, you don't understand. You just changed and shifted to get in alignment so that you could have the marriage you guys wanted.
And let's be honest, back in the day, I probably said I didn't like this. 28 years later, she said I was uncomfortable. But probably when I approached the situation, I said I didn't like this. Now, her woman side, more elegant side is he does it. This is a different word, but it doesn't matter. We were able to. Here's the deal. We were able to communicate. We were able to talk and say, not knowing that we were putting up boundaries, not knowing that we were digging the first fence post hole.
Come on.
But we were recognizing something that wasn't going to unify us in our marriage.
So can I ask a question, Megan? What did you do when he came to you and said that? Did you immediately have an idea of what can I do to put some boundaries between me and this brother?
So I think there's always been this high sense of submission to leadership, authority, respect, honor, those types of things. I don't know why, but it's always been in me. And I think it's just the way that God designed me. But in this situation, I could have gone to the woe is me, I did a terrible thing. But instead, I was able to, I think in the very initial one, I was a little bit defensive. Like, no, I tried to explain myself, but then I had to recognize, like, he just shared his heart with me, which was the thing that I had been trying to get him to do for over a decade. And so from there, I was like, it doesn't matter what the motive of my heart was. If it was perceived as something that it shouldn't have been by him, that's the only thing that matters to me.
Awesome.
So here's the point. She handled his heart well. Mm-hmm. You talked about a high respect. The Bible says for the woman to respect the man and the man to love the woman. She has fostered that. We've gotten to watch that for how long have we been?
Over a decade.
Over a decade.
So
So watching that, she has got this high level. Megan keeps her eye on the ball of respect. Chad keeps his eye on the ball of discipline. And watching them align, there's power that comes out of that. But Chad, you said something I just freaking loved. You talked about you've got deep something and you got high something. What are those?
So as we were talking before the podcast, just laughing and catching up, and we were just talking, and it's deep trenches and high fences.
Gosh.
And I would love to say it came all from discipline or all from the Lord. I don't know where that came from. I think it was back in the day, pre-Christ. I just said I was a good old boy, and I don't know if it was the way I was raised or what, but men, women, whoever I'm speaking to, you know what's right and you know what's wrong.
Come on.
And you have a decision to make, and that's where borders and boundaries start, right? You know what's right and what's wrong. Whether your husband or your wife is giving you what you need at this moment, that's not the matter. You know what's right and wrong. There's no gray area in that. And so we have to begin to take hold of, I'm either going to stand with what's right and what's wrong. And that's where we started digging deep trenches and high fences, knowing what the world would throw at me in the workplace, even in ministry. I said that wrong. At us in life. And so we began to dig post holes. Yep. To pour concrete for our posts and to begin to build our fence at a young age. And I'm going to give credit to the Lord. It was the Lord protecting us, not that we knew what we were doing was right. It was the Lord protecting us.
I love it. High fences and deep trenches. And, I just go think in my own life. we were talking about this before. Chad and I are very different. Megan and Leslie are very different, but we have a friendship. It's like two wings on a plane. You don't want a plane that's two right side wings. You want a left side and right side. And I think they've done a good job of building community around them. And these fences, they've got a story, and I want y'all to tell that. You got a story about a fence. They live on some property. It's a really cool story. Too long to go into, but childhood dream of Chad's, and Megan went with him, and they got this piece of property, and I've got the code. And every time I go into that code, I say a certain thing, and it's between us. So there's just a little, but it's a little blessing that I say every time I hit that code. I'm going to give you the code so you can go sing.
No.
No, I'm not going to do that. But they would welcome you. But I want you to tell that story, but I want you to tell the story. There's things that you're keeping out, but there's also a value of in. Tell us a little bit about that.
So one of the funny things is when we bought this property, the very first thing Chad wanted to do was put up a pipe fence. And it was this huge piece of property with this tiny little farmhouse that we didn't know if we were going to keep or tear down. And like he said, you can hear that story on the Built for Two podcast, but the pipe fence went up before we ever slept on that property. And so there's something about fences that it's not so much what they keep out, but those fences are built to keep stuff in and to keep what's important safe. We had animals, we have cows and horses and those types of things, but the pipe fences, you can crawl straight through them, but it keeps what's important to us, our property, our animals. It keeps us in and it keeps us safe. And so borders, boundaries, fences, and trenches, those aren't for everybody else. Those are for us.
Come on.
Those are for us, because the why behind what we do and the safeguarding of our marriage is for our security and unity. We want to know that our marriage is safe, and we want to know that we are completely unified in what we are fighting with and fighting for.
And I think about, as you're talking, we can become friends tomorrow if I trust you and if I feel safe. And when there's fences, you feel safe. And the reality is, when I get up and go to work every single day into the workplace of unknown, when you get up and go to work every day in the unknown of ministry, the reality is the unknown is what we don't know. But when there's fences, there's safety. And when we begin to build those fences in different seasons of life, the fences are still there. Our life may change inside the boundaries of the fence, but the reality is our fences never change of what we're willing to let in and out of our boundaries.
So to fast forward, we've since built a house on the front of the property closer to this pipe fence. And about a year ago, 6-8 months ago, something like that, there was a car who actually was speeding at an unsafe speed, lost control, and hit our fence. But everything inside the fence was safe. He couldn't come through
The pipe fence?
the pipe fence. He broke a piece of the pipe fence that we then had to get fixed. But what I love about that is because that fence was so heavy duty, strong, sturdy, high, whatever you want to call it, nothing inside of our property was affected. And I feel the same way about, our marriage, that our fences, people know that they're there. I think people know that our marriage is a priority. People know that we are madly in love with each other 29 years later, and people know what we fight for and what we believe and what we're believing God for. But that's also because we continue to sow into, to invest in that. So when we think about our own personal trenches and fences, like, what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that you're willing to allow, and what are the things that just aren't welcome in your marriage?
So these folks that are listening, I do want them to trust us. You said 29, I said 28. It is 28.
It's about to be 29.
Trust us, we're on the 29th year. I just didn't want them to like, hey, I don't trust these folks.
I know they look 22.
Yeah. So 28 going on 29. But what I love about that is so many times we build a nice fancy house and everything's going good. And it's flat, it's awesome, and then something comes up. And the reality is, if there's not a trench, it's easy to get off path. It's easy to cross over to the next lane. And if there's not a fence, it's really easy. And so we chose, now looking back, that's not why I did it, but looking back in the analogy of marriage, you have to begin to dig the trench and set the post and build the fence so that it's going to be good at first for most people. But the reality is when things come at us, we don't know. And so it's so easy to cross over if there's not a border and a boundary.
So can I ask y'all, can you give me some specifics of what are some of the things that are non-negotiables for y'all? 'Cause if I was a listener, I would be thinking, I want to learn.
So early on is what she alluded to, is you do that one. I'm not doing that. Early on, she asked me the question. Early on, the first thing that really comes to mind that we set in place, and actually what she alluded to, the gentleman that did it, it wasn't just an untrust, and it obviously come over into my place, and so that's the first post we drove, right? We didn't even put crossbars on the fence yet. That's the first post that we dug truly in our marriage, is that we would not meet alone with the opposite sex.
I love that.
And it wasn't because there had been any untrust, but the reality is you just don't know. The reality is you don't know when the other person is in a bad spot and they're willing to cross the fence. And you don't know if y'all had a spat that night, if you had a disagreement, and you really sometimes don't know where your heart is, and it allows you to open up and to cross the fence. And so that was the first thing, is meeting with the opposite sex in the same room or riding in the car separately or together.
Yep.
Yep.
So good.
It's kind of an open door policy.
Yep.
The other thing I love, if you're a businessman out there and you're listening to this, if I say what Chad's fixing to say in the ministry, it's going to be like, well, duh. But when he says it in the business world, there is a bigger acceptability to go do things, to go take clients, to go.
It's part of business.
Part of business that we got to go to a certain place and we're going to do this. You've drawn some hard boundaries and drove a post and said, I'm not doing that to my bride.
The reality is there's an end goal here, and it's not just about the next sale. And in my career, I've done the same business for 29 years. I'm in the roofing industry, so construction, roofing, take it as it will. If you know anything about the industry, there can be some things that people have definitely crawled over the fence. But it's more about what I'm protecting. It's more about what I've built. It's more about not just the next sale, but it's more about just putting from day one, the expectations. Have I lost sales? 100%. Because I wouldn't cross the fence. Not with somebody, but to some place. I've lost sales in the industry. But you know what? I've definitely gained more sales because of the fence I've built and the boundaries we've put in place in our marriage.
So I would say another one is definitely not going to the places where the temptations live. That includes, certain types of restaurants or bars or those types of things. And I remember there was a season in our lives where he went on a trip consistently year after year, and something that some of the people on the trip chose to do, Chad was open and honest with me about it. And so I didn't have to worry or wonder, because we had built so much of our marriage on trust, that it wasn't 50,000 questions. And if I had questions, I didn't get in trouble for asking them. I think that's part of it, is that we have to be able to ask the questions. Well, did you think anything? Were you tempted? Was there any, and after you hear the same answers enough times without defense, you're just like, I don't even have to ask that question. So I think it's not going to the places where the temptations live. I think it is also when something could be called into question, being the person to tell. It's about being, it's about sharing that, not being caught in it. So like he had a situation one time at an airport where he was at a bar and a woman sits down beside him and his flight's delayed and he ends up having a couple drinks and talking to this woman for like an hour and a half, but he tells me all about it. So, and I was able to ask questions and there was zero defense in that. And so I think, again, the more we're able to be open and honest, I know that's what you guys have built your lives on, and your borders and boundaries or fences are built on talking through everything. And I think the lack of defense is key in creating a safe space to have the conversations.
I want to re-say this. You said Because there was communication, there was no worry and wonder. Open, honest communication, there was no worry and wonder. And what we're talking about, my dad built baby dolls, LeBears, the Pathfinder, strip joints and bars. So I didn't grow up with a ton of boundaries. I was telling this all the time, and anyone who doesn't see this, you're blind. But he's the Tom Brady in his field. He is the best in his field, the best with people, the best sales, the best integrity, the best this. But he draws a line when it comes to, I'm not going to the strip joint. Y'all knock yourself out. I care about myself, and I care about my wife, and I care about my legacy more than I do making the sale. But what I've seen is he's been more blessed in the long run. Mm-hmm. He might have lost a short-term sale, right? But because you set this boundary, this post in said, no, that doesn't fit with my deal. I love that about you. Where do you think that comes from, and why do you do that?
I would say the big thing, the motto I've always had is if I'm going to sell you, I want to be your friend. And the reality is if that's what you're chasing, then we're chasing two different things. And the reality is we're probably not going to be friends. And so, part of it, it's an easy decision because of that, is because I don't want to just sell you. I want to be a friend. And if I can't, friends like things. And that's not what I like. And so we're probably not going to be friends. So we're probably not going to do business well together.
So I'm going to turn on you for a minute. Tell me some of the things we've done. I know I'm the over talker. You're the over listener. What are some of the boundaries we did?
Well, I would say, like Megan said, just open communication, which of course she usually started. But,
I'm always talking.
Just, like our thought life, or, we were having the conversation earlier of just having massages, and the whole point of how do you feel when a guy gives you a massage and what thoughts go through your mind, and then, coming home and sharing them with you and just being open.
Let me clear that up, because I think it's going to go one direction. She was so cute. I'm like, so honey, did you have a bad thought? It's okay. You've been so sweet to me. And she said, no, it felt good, and it wasn't you massaging me. It was so innocent. But I loved it because she was being vulnerable. It felt good, and he's rubbing my shoulders, but I don't like this. You walked out of the room, and the massage was at her house. Yeah. Her level of boundaries, I think that's part of the thing.
Radar.
She picks up faster than I do because I didn't grow up with a lot of boundaries. And, Megan and I work together. I have to kind of watch and listen and learn, because I can overstep boundaries just because I didn't know them, and I'm learning them. But here's the deal. I'm going to be a student, and I'm going to watch my friends, and I'm going to listen and learn, and I'm going to be correctable and teachable and humble about it. But the reason we have such good boundaries is, I just wanted you to say, it's you. It's you. You were always a safe place. I could always go to Leslie. And for you guys out there who dealt with lust, and Chad's very strong in this area, I wasn't. I was weak. I was super weak. But I came to my wife, and I would tell her, and she'd always tell me, those aren't your thoughts. And I would say, well, I can't tell you the adjectives right now of what I said, but I was like, whose thoughts are these? And she said, the enemy. Let's not align with that. You're going to walk in freedom. And because she walked and stayed next to her post that she had dug very deep, I found freedom August 10th, 1994 because of you. But you guys also care about legacy so much. I want you to talk a little bit, why are deep trenches and high fences important for your legacy?
I want to talk about real quick
yes,
and I literally had this conversation with a gentleman in the workplace recently, and struggling in his marriage. Wasn't sure if he still loved his spouse, but he loved his kids. And sometimes in the moment, we can't see what we don't know. We can't see what we're not currently feeling. But my advice was to him is, you love your kids. Yes, Chad, very important. I love them to death. I would do anything for them. So I said, you do anything for them? He said, 100%. And I said, in this moment, it's not the long-term how I want you to think and feel, but in this moment, do it for your kids. Like, Chad, it should be doing it for his wife. But the reality is sometimes it's the lens we're looking through. We have to see what's right in front of us, what's important in the moment, and evaluate the situation at the time. And so when he was able to, 2 weeks later, he comes back and he said, Chad, he said, I had bad thoughts I wanted to leave, but I looked at my kids and I loved them so much I couldn't leave. And I didn't do it for the kids. I just knew it was right. And so I'm not saying stick around for your kids, but in the moment, sometimes we have to recognize what's the most important at the moment. And then God will continue to shift our heart to what truly is most important, which is marriage.
I've never had this thought until you said it. How did those kids come to be? You're actually looking at a part of your wife, and that's what you love about them. And somehow the enemy has carved that out of the, what you call it, lens, the perception of it. You're pointing them back. But sometimes we have to hang on to that to get to the next thing that holds us there.
We want to get to the next, but sometimes we have to hold on to what is the monkey bar that we can grab. It's not the one we want, but it's the one we can grab.
I think that comes back to one thing we were talking about right before we hit record was it's a pre-made decision. It's something we decided a long time ago that it's not an option. It's not even on the table. And so that's also...
Just say it.
What?
The D word.
The D word. The D word. That's, we always tell couples, take the D card off the table. Like sometimes we play the divorce card like we're playing a game and we threaten with it or we use it as to wage a bet. But the truth is quitting isn't an option for us. For the sake of our legacy, this family that we started in 1995, we don't have an out. There's no second act for us. This is it. This is what God has called us to, and we're committed to that. And so when it's hard, that's when we have to rally. That's when we have to rally with people around us. We need community. We need spiritual mentors. If we need professional counseling, whatever it is that we might need in those moments, like we pre-made a decision. So anything that might try to come into our fences, it's not even a temptation because like I have prayed for decades, almost 3 decades now, to have eyes only for him. He is the only thing that makes me, want to jump in bed. Like the only thing. And I go there because I don't even talk like that, but that's how the Lord has protected us. That is the high fence the Lord has given me personally that, I have eyes for you, baby.
Like jumping in bed because of my eyes is the sexiest thing you've ever said to me.
Aww.
You heard it on the Unbridled Life. Your sex life will go up. So here's what I've never, and I love being with them because content just pops out of my brain. They built fences, but they didn't put in gates. And some of you have put in a gate called the divorce, and it's freaking branded. You've used it so many times. Rip the gate out, put a post in, and put your crossbars. That should not be an option. That's what you guys are talking about. Gates are so people can come in and come out, and Chad said it, that are trusted. But when you put a gate in, that's the option B and C, it's a bad deal. You end up in a field that's not yours.
That's good.
Yeah. So where do we go next? Where do we go next?
She asked a question. I started with something. What was your question? Do you remember?
What are some of the practical things that y'all do to safeguard?
I think another one we do is obviously it's so easy now. If no one's got a Verizon phone anymore. I don't know. Verizon does that, but yeah, I don't know. But I think everybody has an Apple. If you don't, go get an Apple now.
Yeah, that's right. Android, I guess.
Apple spots are unbridled, but share location. And it's not that I ever feel checked on. The reality is most of the time it's to know what time I'm home so that dinner can be ready. Most days. Yeah. Or just waiting.
Lately it's been rough.
Yeah, that's okay. Or to call in and say,
where are we going? Where are we meeting?
But the reality is it's another safeguard of I have zero fear of if she's checking. And the reality is I know that if I send her to voicemail 6 times in a row because I'm in a meeting, she immediately can go and know, okay, I'm in a meeting.
Check your location.
He's at the corporate office and he hasn't left yet.
You're not on the side of the highway.
Yeah. And it's just, it's a peace of mind. And guys, it all goes back to trust. This is not because you don't trust. You don't put safeguards because you don't trust, because you want to continue to trust. You want to trust from the beginning in this thing that we call marriage, and we call that God's called us together in unity. And for their unity, it starts with trust.
And some couples will do the whole, you can ask for their phone at any time, but ours is really more of, if we're texting or doing something, we'll just be like, hey, who are you talking to? Or what are you looking at? And it's not because that's been a broken area. We also have access to each other's phones, social media. We know passcodes, passwords.
It's good.
Let's be honest. I don't have yours, but I don't want it.
You don't want to watch all the
You
reels.
post on mine.
Because I have like 14 pages connected to my account, but it's all accessible at any point. He doesn't doubt for 1 minute that he could look at it and see, and so nobody's hiding any devices or using anything.
Well, let's be honest, guys, girls, women, ladies, men, whoever's listening, children. The world throws enough at us that comes at us, whether you're in ministry or you're in the workplace. And there's a lot that's thrown at us every day. We have done this, to be totally honest with you, because we run fast and we run hard. And there's one less thing that we have to worry about inside of marriage, inside of life, inside of building a legacy. There's deep trenches and high fences. So that's one less thing that she has to worry about and that I have to worry about, that we can continue down the path to go fast and go hard.
So, Leslie, you like to grab my phone and go through my text.
I do. It helps me, like, curious, like, I wonder what he did today. What was on his mind? Or, I don't know. It's just a quick, easy way.
She'll literally read through my text, and not one time have I ever been, baby, I feel violated. I think she does that. She doesn't want all the words I'm going to give her so she can read it and get the short version of it. But again, it comes to that defensiveness. And if you don't have a gate on that, and it's not a two-way gate, then it feels like you're hiding something. And your spouse doesn't have the trust, which goes back to what Megan said. They worry and they wonder because you won't put a gate on the fence. And I think we can all learn those things. I'm going to tell you that being a part of Fully Connected Marriage and watching what we do, the whole time I feel like I'm shopping, listening and watching couples. Man, they do this really well. I watch a husband put his arm around his wife and touch her, and I'm practicing being quieter. I'm not doing very well on this podcast,
You're
right?
not supposed to right now.
Yeah, but giving her places, one of the things I want to talk to y'all about, because y'all ministered to me about this. Let's talk about just for the next 5 minutes about expectations, how that can be a killer, what that does to intimacy. And in my opinion, expectation kills intimacy.
I want to touch on one thing you said
Yes,
that stuck out to me is sometimes we feel like our privacy is violated when somebody wants our phone, right? I mean, the reality is you said I do. If you're married, if you're thinking about getting married and you're thinking about saying I do, it's unity. It's one. So the violation only comes if you're hiding something.
That's good.
So back to your question, it goes back to communication. I'll let you start this off.
Well, I think expectations are the way that we feel like we're entitled to something. Because the truth is that if I put expectations on Chad, it's because I'm expecting him to meet my needs. But in reality, the only one worthy of our expectations is the Lord. Everything that we want, need, desire is to be laid at his feet and to let him do what only he can do with it. And I think when it comes to even safeguarding our marriages and staying in the boundaries, when I start leaning too heavy on Chad and I start expecting him to sit in the seat of God, that is when expectations are running the show and robbing our marriage. I mean, when expectations run the show, they rob our marriage. And so how do I communicate my needs in a way that he can hear and receive them and not feel responsible for them, I think is what it really comes down to.
And we find even in our own marriage, and couples we meet with, is it's a lack of communication. what we're both desiring is communication. And when a lot of times we talk a lot about unmet expectations, and it's when we feel like each of us are failing in an area and we're judging and they're not meeting my needs, so I'm not going to meet their needs. But when we boil it all down and we bring it back to the root, it's the lack of communication that we've put on each other, that we're just not communicating. And she's a heck of a lot better at it than me.
Not true.
But in our home, she has to be that one, and there's usually one spouse. For them, it's Marc. For us, it's Megan. Fair,
Right.
and to bring out so that we make sure that we're not doing those unmet expectations.
Well, and shameless plug for the Fully Connected Marriage book. If you want to grab one, you can get that on Amazon or on the ElevateHim.com website. But we talk about 3 different types of expectations. We talk about the uncommunicated expectations, unmet expectations, and unrealistic expectations. So they usually fall in one of those 3 categories. What I find is that most times mine are unrealistic or unmet. For him, it's mostly uncommunicated. And so it's like, if I don't know what I'm aiming for, how can I hit it? And
Wait a minute. If I don't know what you're aiming for, how can I hit it? That's the unmet part, right? Fair?
Yes,
Unbridled
true.
marriage, right?
True.
Unbridled.
Absolutely.
Come see us.
But any way you look at it, it all comes down to, have you communicated your heart is really what it boils down to, because we were created as these human beings with human feelings, and we have to share those with our human mouths, because they're not mind readers.
And a lot of times we find that when one of us puts a unmet expectation, sometimes we don't even know what we want, but we figure that out through communication.
Yeah.
We were at that this morning.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, we were walking through that. I think a cool thing on the episode, we got to meet with MJ and Angela. No one wants to go through a misstep, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's an emotional affair, spiritual affair, physical affair, there's 900 different ways that you can miss that. But I was blown away when he misstepped. He was a worship leader. He didn't want to do this. He didn't have a post in the right place. And he's got that post now. But she said something blew me away. She said, the night that he told her, she said, we made love. And that is not what I was thinking. And so I was just like, Angela, open that up a little more. And she said, his misstep did not give me permission to not take responsibility for my land. She said, the reason I made love to him is I was reclaiming my land.
That's good.
And I went, okay. Instead of an expectation, she turned that into an anticipation to take back land and put a post in. I was just like, wow. I want to tell you out there, if you're listening to this, I don't think anyone goes, I'm going to go have an affair today. Or I'm going to go have an emotional affair. Or I'm going to get too close to a brother. Or I'm going to get too close to a sister. But when we can talk about it, walk through it, and go through it,
That's good.
I think we can stay out of the property. James Robinson used to say this all the time, and I love him. I'm always going to plug him. But he talked a lot, and it goes along with what you said, Chad. He said, fences on highways are not to limit your fun. They're there for protection. He said, you don't want a baby out on a highway, and sometimes we act like children and out in a place that we're not supposed to be in, that we know is wrong. And we don't listen to that little voice, that little gut check. It doesn't take big Holy Spirit falling over your life. You already know, man, I know this isn't right. Listen to the voice.
Well, there's 2 things, we all drive on the highway, and there's nothing worse when we hit those little bumps on the side. And we hate them, and sometimes we think bad thoughts, sometimes we say bad things. But the reality is, it's for our safety. And sometimes
Wake you
we
up.
feel like fences can be a violation. Those shouldn't be there. We should just be able to drive the way we want to. In our marriages, we should be able to do what we want to. But the reality is, it's for our safety. And I think back as I just recently got a puppy. And when you
Puppy's name, got to tell what breed.
Pendleton.
Pendleton.
And my wife just told me I spelt it wrong. I'm like, no, I didn't. I got it on the gunner kennel. I got it on the gunner feed box. She goes, babe, you spelt that wrong. And I said, no, I didn't. That's how they spell it.
On the whiskey.
No,
Pendleton, Kentucky.
In Pendleton, Kentucky, it's different than the bottle.
You know, I was born in Louisville, Kentucky.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, well, you learn something every time on the Unbridled Life.
But I think about that, and I think about the aspect of a puppy, and I think about the newlyweds listening to this or thinking about getting married. When you have that puppy and you get it, there ain't nothing better. And then you get home, and there ain't freaking nothing worse. Let's just be honest. And I love this dog. I've never had a dog sleep with me, and this dog sleeping at the foot of our bed, which is a God thing or craziness. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. God can do anything. But I think about when we leave the house, we put up a baby gate to keep the dog in, and we only do that because it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And so if you're out there and you're thinking about marriage or you're getting married, build the fence first. Because I put that baby gate up because that dog doesn't know not to poop in the house.
Right.
That dog doesn't know not to pee on the carpet. That dog doesn't know to chew my wife's shoes. And it had none of that. Well, it has pooped. But I put that baby gate up because you don't know what he doesn't know. And when you're in marriage, just like when I picked that dog up in Kentucky, it was the best thing ever. When you get married, it's all going to be great until it's not. And when I come home and there's poop on the carpet,
stage.
it's not good.
Right.
But I put a gate up to protect the dog
That's great.
so that I don't hurt the dog. Yeah. And in marriage, we put a fence up very early to protect our marriage, not knowing what we don't know.
God, it's great to know.
And here's what I wrote right before we started to record. And I feel like this is a great place to land, but every layer of protection gives peace. And so if you think about it as the boundaries, the fences, the trenches, the borders, whatever you want to call them in your marriage, every one of those gives me peace and gives him peace. And that's ultimately our goal, is to create a home and an environment, an atmosphere that is safe and full of peace. Peace is a fruit of the Spirit. And so we want peace to be what rules and reigns in our homes. And so when I say no to something, when he says no to an appointment at a certain place, or when he tells a woman that he's got to meet her there, he's not going to ride in the car with her, or whatever it is because we are protecting the peace that we want in our homes and in our lives.
That's good.
Really good. We did this. There was three of us, y'all, us, and the Martinez's. We asked each other what our superpower, and it didn't come across very cool on social media. But I look across, and his superpower is discipline, and he knows how to be a friend. Her superpower is joy. Her superpower is peace. Mine's hope. Find out what your superpower is and start building your post off your superpower. And peace is really good, which lands me this. I want you to share this. I want you to go on YouTube. I want you to go on social media, and that's awesome. There's my plug. Buy books. Yeah, you do whatever. But someone that I know that operates and traffics in peace daily, and she's troubled when she's not, is I want you to just pray over marriages and over lives that they encounter peace, and we'll do that together, and we'll land there.
Lord, I just thank you for all the listeners out there right now. Father, I just pray for all the couples, all the people that are wanting to learn more about how to put boundaries up, healthy boundaries in their marriage. And Father, I just pray right now, Lord, that you would give them peace and you would give them the ability to communicate with their spouse what their needs are, and that you would just do good things in these couples. And so, Father, I just pray blessings over them, over Chad and Megan and Marc and myself, in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thanks for joining us on the Unbridled Life. Listen to this. Thanks so much for listening to the Unbridled Life Podcast. We know your time is valuable, and we hope we bring real and relevant content that helps you live that unbridled life. If you want to help us spread the message, you can rate or review the podcast on whatever platform you like to listen to us, and share it with a friend or two. If you want to know more about who we are and what we're doing, head on over to theunbridledlifepodcast.com and learn more.